So we are now in stage 2 of our limited palette still life painting. We have completed the Imprimatura underpainting, which is simply what it sounds like. It is the first layer of the painting before we move on to our second stage, where we're going to bring in a little bit of color in our limited palette. Again, I have mixed my range of colors from my blue to my burnt sienna, and then I've done a 3-step value scale. I'm going to come back and do a more intense value scale as I'm painting, but I want to start with those 3 values: my lightest light, my middle value, and my darkest dark to start with, because I want my values to correspond with the values that I saw in the Imprimatura stage of the painting. So we're going to break it down to 3 simple values to begin with, and we're going to start to look at those temperature shifts that are happening in the painting. So starting with my large brush again, I have started with a warm dark color here, not the burnt sienna as it comes out of the tube. But I'm going to go, I think, with my second step in a little bit of Gamsol to give me a little bit of fluidity, maybe a touch of medium, but I don't want to go too much medium yet, because that will make my paint too fat. Remember, we want to work lean to fat, which means we're going to go from less oil to more oil. Leaner paint has less oil, fatter paint has more. So if I'm looking at my still life here, my warms, these warms are not particularly vivid in the urn. They are modified and warmer here in the center, and then they get a little cooler and a little more neutral out to that edge. So I'm going to step in on my color chart a little bit and see that the colors are cooling down slightly, still in my dark values, but you should be able to see a difference in the temperature of the paint that I'm applying here. And again, cooler up under the lip of the urn and gets warmer as it goes across. Again, I'm using a large brush, as large a brush as I have, so that I can generally state my values without getting into too much detail. And then I've got dark here for the handle of that urn, where it comes down and connects with the bottom of the urn. All right, so now I'm going to move to, I'm sticking with my darks for right now. I'm going to move into this background dark, which is fairly cool and neutral, because it's black. It's going to be my most neutral dark. So I'm going to go to that middle range here, which is my middle of the road, neither burnt sienna nor blue, but really my most neutral, darkest dark there. That's going to be the one that is going to be closest to black. There we go. So I'm going to use that edge of my brush to find the edge of the urn and the edge of the napkin here. And there's just a little bit of lighter value on the edge of that urn, but I honestly right now can't really see it if I squint my eyes. I'm really just looking for those 3 values. So if I squint my eyes, I don't see that differentiation except in temperature between these 2 darks. So I've got a cooler dark and a warmer dark, just a little bit of variation there. And I'm going to come back up here to that middle dark again. I'm going to keep working across, cleaned my brush a little bit so I can get some of that warm paint off of the brush. And I'm going to just take the side of the brush to help set the edge of that white napkin as it goes behind my urn. I'm going to pull that dark out here. And I've got a little more of that very dark value here underneath the bottom of the napkin, just that skinny, skinny compressed wedge. A little bit there. And then on the right hand edge, so my lean paint here. Right now I'm going to step to my medium middle value, which is going to be part of the urn. Actually, I have one more dark that is going to be on the cooler side, right up in here. Hard edge right at the top, very, very dark little shadow in between the fold of that fabric. And then I'm just going to let it kind of fade out. Okay. And maybe just a little bit of dark here. And a little bit of dark here under the bottom of my sphere. And a little bit there. Okay. Now I want to go for my middle values. Again, I'm going to use a big brush. I'm going to go to a second brush. Make sure there's not two. There's a little bit of glare here. Let me shift a little bit, see if we can lose that glare on the left side of the painting. I think that's light coming in from the window. Give a little bit of a shift here so we don't have too much of a glare there. That's better. Shift my camera. So painting, as y'all will find out, you're affected by the light outside. Those of you that are painting in the hall right now will certainly see that as well. So, all right, so now my middle values, I'm going to go with a big brush again, and I'm looking at some middle values along here in the blue of the napkin and the cloth and the ground plane. Okay, so looking at my temperature, so my middle value on that urn is going to be somewhere, I think, between maybe a little bit more red, maybe in here. So I'm going to establish that middle value. Coming across the top of the urn. A little bit across the top there. And then a little bit of a lighter middle tone coming down the side of the urn this way. Again, remember, I'm going to modify with details as I go deeper into the process. A little bit of a middle value here, and a little bit across the top there. Bring that dark down on the inside of the urn. So I'm starting to think about it in terms of major tonal shift in the forms that I see. I need to go back with a little bit of dark. Don't be afraid to go backwards if need be. I'm going to bring that edge out a little bit more, and then my shadow here needs to be a little stronger right under the edge of that urn. Okay. Now I'm going to think about the blue cloth here. So I've got some middle value blue. It's not super bright blue. I'm going to go maybe deepen this value just a little bit. So I'm modifying back and forth. There we go, for that inside of that fold. And again, where that shadow gradually gets lighter as it comes down. And we're going to come down this way a little bit, bring those shadows together. Then I have a shadow, kind of a triangular shaped shadow here. Okay, so there's my medium value on the cloth. So I think I may go ahead and work into my lighter values on that cloth a little bit. A little bit of Gamsol, make that paint a little more fluid. So I've got a hard edge up at the top here and out this way, and it blends together that medium value and my light value as it comes down that cylindrical roll of fabric. And then I've got a little more light under here. Again, big, broad shapes. Not looking for a tremendous amount of detail yet. Really just breaking it down as generally as possible. So we'll go across the top of that fold as it disappears into the opening of the urn. And there's a little bit of light on that fold right there. Okay. Now I'm going to work into here. I think I've got some middle tones back here. This, I think, is a darker value, so I think I need to go back with my warm dark. I see this much darker here the wood of the tabletop, then I can work back into my middle tones when I get to, there we go, get to the cloth. So middle tones here on the cloth. Now, it's not as warm as the tones that I see here on the urn, but it's not as cool as what we have on the blue. It's going to be sort of right in the middle. So I think I'm going to go for this brush. I think I'm going to go for maybe this. Maybe here. This middle tone here. Because that cloth doesn't have a ton of color to it. It's neither here nor there. I'm not going to worry about those red stripes quite yet. I want to come back with the cast shadow in here, restate that cast shadow just a little bit and let that light pull some of that light paint in as that shadow drifts out away from the edge of the sphere, and soften that shadow there as well. And under the edge of my fabric there. Okay. Now I want to move into my, I think I'll pull a little bit of that fabric out this way. Okay. All right, now I'm going to move into my lights. Lost the edge of that sphere just a little bit, so I want to make sure I come back and correct my drawing. There we go. And my dark here. So I don't want to leave any holes in my painting. Okay. So in the white cloth, I've got a middle tone shadow here and here as it comes down behind that blue cloth. So the blue cloth is lighter in value than the white behind it. So I've got middle tone, and they're going to be really, I think they're pretty gray here, and then it moves into the lighter tones as it gets closer to the light. So I'm going to go with my gray middle tone for my shadow. So I've got a sharp edge, hard edge shadow here that gradually moves up to the top of that piece of fabric, and then it comes down. So I want to find the general shape of these shadows and lay them in So that shadow is like a long, skinny wedge coming down, going behind my blue cloth, and then it comes up. So generally I want to state my shadows first before I come back with my lights, because if we think about it, the light is hitting on top of the shadows. So you want to think about that light being the thing that's hitting the surface of these objects. So I'm going to lay in my shadows first. I think this shadow, I'm going to go one more step on my value scale. A little bit darker. It's not quite my darkest dark, but it's pretty dark. Back here behind the urn and my piece of shop towel. So all of this starts to be kind of a lost edge. So lost edges are when an object turns into shadow. So where the round form of this urn turns into the shadow, it almost fades away. You almost lose that edge. So I've almost got a lost edge happening here as well. So you want to pay attention to that. It's going to help your round objects appear to be turning away from the light. So just here, where this urn, where the light is hitting the urn on this side, and then it's turning away, and it's turning away, where the shadow kind of creeps up around it, is going to be very important. So now I'm going to go with my lightest lights. I'm going to clean my brush a little bit. And again, I still want to pay attention to temperature in my light areas. So I think where the light is hitting this napkin, that's going to be a warmer light because our light is warm. I've got regular light bulbs here that when they hit the object, they're going to light them up with a warm light, and the shadow is going to be cooler. So this shadow is cooler, the light's going to be slightly warmer. And so I'm going to go maybe a little bit of these two. Okay, and my lightest light is going to be here, across the top of that fold. And then it's going to modify a little bit as it blends into that shadow. So I'm going to pull a little bit of that light of my light. There we go. So my light is pretty warm down here as well. As it moves away from the light source, which is to my right, it's going to get a little cooler as it moves away. I'm going to soften the edge of that shadow as well. Warmer light still down here. Work across the top here where these lights are hitting on top of this crease and this wrinkle running down this way. And then I think that this is starting to run into a middle value. If I squint my eyes, it's not far from the value of the napkin. So I'm going to jump back up here with my cooler gray, middle gray, which is still a good bit lighter, of course, than the value of my urn and the value of the background. So I'm going to still have a good amount of contrast between the background and the napkin. And then this shadow softens and softens here. Okay. And I've got to get a little more of a dark middle value here. And I have to say I've probably edged into probably 5 values as opposed to just 3 as I've been mixing these values together where they soften their edges, and that's okay. And then the last thing I want to state at this point is the value of the sphere. So it is going to be lighter across the top and down the, oops, it's getting into a little bit of a middle value there. So I see a really kind of a crisp contrast, especially here as it comes in front of that urn. And then it's going to have a reflected light under the bottom where it passes in front of that cast shadow. And then I'm going to go a little warmer for my middle tone. So I'm going to go a little warmer than what I have here. So my light is coming from the right side. So I want to make sure that I've got my form shadow in the right place, because my lightest lights are going to be over here. Come back. So these the light's really coming from above and to the right. So it's going to come across, it's coming from this direction. So I'm going to have a little bit of my shadow, halftone shadow creeping up on the right side. And then I want to break up the edge of that shadow just a little bit. There we go. And then I want to increase the contrast just a little bit behind the edge of that sphere so that it starts to stand out. from the background. So I'm not going to put a highlight in there yet. Okay, so I feel okay about that. This is a basic temperature study of limited palette of our still life. So this is where I want you to be on Tuesday. We'll come back and we will increase our detail and increase the variety in our values. But again, we're really dealing with 3 values: our darks, our middle values in here, and our lights on the white cloth and the sphere and the blue cloth. If you have any questions about what I need from you on Tuesday, let me know. Your color chart, your imprimatura, which will be covered up, and your first stage of your limited palette painting.